think, a testament to how interested there is in Washington to the Southern Corridor and energy issues is the large audience here. And I have, unfortunately, to know a number of you, and we're really from a variety of embassies, government organizations, faculties in the university, so it's wonderful to see you here today to discuss the Southern Gas Corridor and what it means for European energy security and European security in general. We have Mr. Joe Murphy, who's the Southern Corridor Vice President from BP, who currently resides in Baku, and Mr. Michael Hoffmann, who's joined us here from Switzerland, who is External Affairs and Communication Directors for TAP, which is a segment of the Southern Gas Corridor. So we'll have, because this project, the Southern Gas Corridor will be the first project to bring new gas volumes from outside of Europe into Europe in decades. It transits 7 countries, 6 regulatory systems, 12 investing companies, 12 gas buyers. It could have spurs that would allow gas to get to additional markets, such as in the Balkans, and could accommodate additional supplies, whether from Iraq, Eastern Mediterranean, Iran in the future. So it's a really interesting project in terms of its flexibility and the kind of infrastructure it could put in place, but also managing that kind of ship with so many countries, so many companies, so many buyers. It takes a lot of skills. So
you just finished my presentation.
So to show how collaborative this project is, well, the Southern Gas Corridor has 3 main components, which they'll just talk about. This actually presentation of BP and TAP is going to be quite collaborative, and they're going to kind of go back and forth in their presentation. So I'd like to open the floor up to Joe and to Michael, and welcome to Georgetown.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for taking all of my key bullets. So what we wanted to do today is we're not going to go through a formal presentation slide by slide. I don't think that's appropriate. What we'd like to do is have a general conversation, talk a little bit about the background behind the project, the energy demand that drives this, about the strategic intent of the project, about the progress we've made. And I think that's an important one, and we'll concentrate quite a lot on that, because since December, since the final investment decision last December 2013, there's been significant progress. Obviously, you move from more of the negotiation point of view to a construction point of view, and people see that it's less obvious to them construction. So we would like to talk about the progress that's being made, and then we'll open the floor for questions. So we, Michael, I think we'll speak for both of us. We probably won't speak for more than 15 minutes maximum. We're going to use one slide, and we're going to try and make it as interactive as possible.
And does the back row hear? Lance, can you hear them?
Okay.
You're okay? Okay, good.
No, you can't hear or you can?
It's a little louder would be good.
A little louder, okay. I will shout a little louder.
If you don't mind speaking in English, we would appreciate that.
My Azeris not good. So just a little background. Before I start, I would like to give a little background about myself. So I've been in BP just for 14. I've been in BP for 14 years now. I primarily worked in the upstream and in operations in Vietnam, in Egypt, in Dubai, in Houston, in Qatar. But I've also spent time working in downstream and in chemicals, and I've done work for the World Bank on privatization. So my background is a little varied background. I'm not strictly an engineer who delivers on the construction of this project. I'm more an overall manager for the project in order to ensure that we deliver safely, on schedule and on time, the entire Southern Corridor. So that's a little bit of my background, not a traditional engineer's aspect to this. It's more about non-technical risks, the risks of the partnership, the risk of the politics, and how we manage that. Michael, do you want to?
Yes, on the same side, I equally am not an engineer. I also deal with the politics of TAP. I've been doing so for the last 5.5 years. Also, actually previously worked in BP. In fact, we were both in Vietnam together. So we know each other from then. But I also have a different life in where I actually work for the NGO community for half of my career, and then sort of jumped ship into the private world. And my first job was actually getting the environmental impact assessment concluded for the BTC, the Baku to BT Ceyhan pipeline, and from there moved to Azerbaijan, Vietnam, and now currently in Switzerland. So a bit like Joe, I'm looking after the I'm looking after the non-technical risks, as such the political risks for the project, and trying to make sure that those are managed effectively and we have a successful tap bit of the value chain. But of course, tap is nothing without the rest of the value chain. The rest of the value chain is nothing without tap, so we all have to work together. Hence our tag team today. Show the joined upness.
So what I would like to do is just start with one map. If we could go to the one map and talk before you've done it. So this, it's important to get the concept here that there are four main parts to the project. There's Shah Deniz 2 in Azerbaijan, which is the offshore facilities, which will bring 16 BCMA of gas into Europe. There's SPC, which is a pipeline through Azerbaijan and Georgia. That pipeline and the Shah Deniz offshore development are both operated by BP on behalf of the consortium. So they're both operated by BP. The total spend, and approximate total spend for those two elements of this project is $28 billion. We then look at the third part of this project, which is TANAP, which is the Trans-Anatolian pipeline right across Turkey. That is managed and operated by SOCAR. And then finally, you have the piece of the project TAP through Greece, Albania, and into Italy, which is operated by TAP as a company standalone company. What you will notice throughout all of the project, BP and SOCAR are linked in every element of this project. However, all the elements are equally important. If one part fails, then the whole endeavour fails. And so you have to remember that the schedule and the delivery of each part, each four parts of this project are absolutely essential to deliver gas into Europe in January 2020 is the latest schedule. Brenda referred to the complexity of this from a politics point of view. So as you can see, it goes from Azerbaijan right through to Europe, has 7 countries that are part of this project. We have 11 partners and we have 11 buyers. Okay, so you can imagine the complexity of dealing with anything through Azerbaijan right through to Italy, the different cultures we deal with, the different companies we deal with, the different issues on the ground that we deal with. So an incredibly complex geopolitical project, which I don't think has ever really, the like has been seen of before. So very exciting project to be involved with. Michael, anything to add?
No, but maybe just for clarification, Joe spoke about 7 countries. That 7th country is Bulgaria, okay, where there will be gas deliveries there. So not obviously directly on the value chain, but it is anticipated that, I'll speak a little bit about this later, it's anticipated that there will be a connection from TAP into Bulgaria to make sure that the Bulgarians get some gas supply.
So this project will deliver 16 BCMA of gas. That gas has already been sold to the 11 buyers for the next 25 years. Single biggest gas deal ever done. So 25 years of gas already sold, coming out of Azerbaijan into southern Europe. So what's this sort of the demand behind this? Why do they need the gas into southern Europe? Well, there's a document BP pulls together, which is the Energy Review, and by 2035, essentially, energy consumption is going to have increased by 40%. So that is the equivalent of another China or another US in the market. So 40% by 2035 energy increase. Renewables will only make up around 7% of that. They'll only contribute 7% of that. So we do have to continue to rely on fossil fuels. And that's why there's a number of strategic infrastructure projects delivering gas and condensate, which are getting the support at the moment. I mean, gas is a natural choice from a greenhouse gases point of view. It's the most environmentally efficient, it's the ready available. And what you're seeing is that Europe is the largest importer of natural gas already, but by 2035 it will need to import 2/3 of its gas demand. So Europe is absolutely committed to needing gas from elsewhere. So what we have here is the second part of a journey from Azerbaijan. The first part was the BTC oil pipeline, which came out of Azerbaijan. This is the next step, and that was 20 years ago, 1994, when I just finished university. Makes me feel old now. So this is the next step. This is bringing gas from the new, Shah Deniz 2 gas field right into Europe. The second stage it's very. We're here actually to celebrate at an event this evening, the ACG 20th anniversary of the contract of the century. This is the next contract of the century. This is an amazing infrastructure project of such vast size and sort of geopolitical issues that it changes gas supply into Europe for decades to come. So the three strategic intents would be link Caspian resources into Europe, would be a new source of gas, of domestic gas, a new source of gas into Europe, and it opens up opportunities for a series of interconnectors across Europe. And with that, Michael, I'll pass on to you about some of the possibilities of what TAP can do in Europe.
Okay, yeah, so we have pipelines marked here, but I think one of the questions that's often asked about TAP, all of you will recall the exciting race. We had 4 pipeline projects, if you recall. We had the Nabucco and the CEEP, the Southeast European pipeline. We had TAP and the ITG system. So when we went through a series of semi-finals, and then we went through the final, and in June last year, TAP was the successful project to actually bring gas into Europe. A lot of commentary, and it's still bubbling around, so I think I just wanted to focus on this point that Joe has alluded to, and that is, when one looks at the region, and when you ask yourself the question, which of these countries actually are the most reliant on single source suppliers, it's Bulgaria and it's Greece. And through what the Shah Deniz consortium have done in terms of the selling of gas, we're in a position whereby 1 billion cubic meters will be sold to Bulgaria, and 1 to Greece, and the remainder onto Italy. That's an important point to remember, because actually what we're doing with that is making sure that, obviously there's a commercial imperative, we want to make sure that we make money out of this, but we're also dealing with the policy objective, and that is to ensure that these 2 countries actually get security of supply through diversified supply sources. That's a key element. So how will that be done? In Bulgaria, there are actually 2 potential options. One that currently exists, the Kula-Sirio-Castro line, which is just here on the edge near Fyrom, and then a proposed pipeline called IGB, which goes from Komotini up into Bulgaria. Now that IGB, the Interconnected Greece-Bulgaria pipeline, again has its own investors, has Greek, Italian and Bulgarian investors, and they've been looking to develop that. Hopefully they will be ready on time, as Joe said, by 2019, 2020, early 2020, to then receive the gas and bring that through. But then we have this entire region here in the Western Balkans. Many of these countries either don't have any gas supply at all, Albania, Montenegro, pretty much most of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So in that context, there is the opportunity through the Ionian Adriatic pipeline, which actually spans all the way. But again, that has not been built, it's not been completed. So I think what we're trying to say is that in terms of the selection, the European part at least, the selection of TAP actually very much contributes to the sort of geostrategic importance of ensuring that Europe maintains its security of supply. But one caveat on, of course, all of this is that the gas, as Joe mentioned, $100 billion worth has been committed for a period of 25 years. And the markets are Bulgaria, Greece and Italy. So if anybody else would like to have gas, whilst TAP can be a conduit for bringing and shipping gas through, entities in this region obviously have to go and purchase gas. They have to find gas from somewhere. But TAP can put in interconnections throughout the pipeline system. It doesn't really matter where that is. So we can help support that. Another point is that when we get to Italy, Italy is a well-developed pipeline system. And once you get to the north, you'll see one of the partners here in TAP, one of the shareholders called Fluxys. Probably not a name that you're familiar with. To be honest, I wasn't that familiar with them when they became a shareholder. But they're actually a major European TSA. They operate many pipelines in Europe. Now their great interest here is to ensure that there is a possibility of having what they call physical reverse flow from Italy up through Switzerland into Germany and then to the Benelux countries, etc. So that actually allows Fluxys to actually bring gas for the first time from south to north. At the moment, all of the gas comes from north to south. So there are some strategic elements of the potential interconnectors that the whole southern gas corridor can provide as benefits.
Thank you. So just following on from that, we've talked about essentially a couple of requirements for this to be a success. The first is the track record of delivery of a project of this size. The second would be sort of the long-term gas sales that underpin this. The third is around a stable political environment. And what I'd like to draw your attention to is the different partners that you have within this consortium. The different partners within this consortium were not random. This was a very specific generation of partners to support where this gas is coming from and where this gas is going to. So if you look at Shah Deniz, we have in Shah Deniz obviously BP and SOCAR, but then we have Statoil, we have TPAO, Turkish company, and then we have two companies which I'm sure I'm going to get questions on, Miko, which is an Iranian company, and Lukoil, which is a Russian company. And I'm not even going to go there just at the moment, but I'm sure I'll get questions related to that at some point. You'll also notice that going in through Turkey, BOTAŞ, the big midstream Turkish company, is a partner in that. Wherever possible, what we've created here in these consortiums and with this structure is partners who support the geopolitics of the region. And you can see that right through, and Michael just drew attention to the different partners within TAP as well. So very important to keep alignment between the partners, keep a stable political environment for the delivery of this project. And as you can well imagine, and again, as I'm sure we'll get questions about, there's an awful lot going on in the neighbourhood which puts this project particularly under the spotlight in terms of deliverability. I think just before we, if there's anything else from you, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Okay. Maybe just to emphasise one a little bit about the strategic intent, but also maybe just a little bit about and where are we on? Let me speak on behalf of TAP. On the strategic intent, I mean, one of the things that I think is important to realise, but that also applies to the whole value chain, is that it's all been designed in such a way that we can double the throughput, the volume, the capacity of the pipeline system. The TAP piece is a 48-inch pipeline, 36-inch offshore, but it means that we can go then, with adding just some additional compressors, we can go to 20 billion cubic meters plus. That's an important element. The other important element is that under EU regulation, all new projects now have to, by law, offer what we call physical reverse flow capability. So with a flick of a switch, literally, we should be able to, we have to demonstrate that we can bring gas through the other direction. So assuming some kind of bigger crisis here, assuming the gas gets cut off, assuming TAP and the rest of the system is operating, we can bring gas from Italy back into Greece, into Bulgaria, even into Turkey, etc. So lots of important elements. But where are we? I think we've had a very good last week. We've had environmental impact assessments approved in both Italy and in Greece. As you know, there's quite stringent processes that we have to follow. It's taken us a long time to get there, but it means that the project is now very much on a secure footing. We have a lot of procurement activities that are currently ongoing, nowhere near in comparison to the upstream, but I'll let Joe talk about the numbers there. But it's all about line pipe, it's about construction, it's about ball valves, it's about compressors, it's a whole range of different activities. So all of that process is happening. Groundbreaking, technically for us, doesn't really start until the construction proper doesn't really start until the beginning of 2016, and then we have a sort of 3.5-year construction period. However, given the remoteness in Albania and some of the very high mountainous areas here, we actually will start early next year to improve approximately 100 kilometres, or build new 100 kilometres of roads. We will rehabilitate 50 bridges and build 2 new bridges, just so that we can get the equipment up to the sort of right of way, so we can start construction. So a lot of activity, and that's not even to talk about all the land, easement and acquisition. Just to give you some numbers, 55,000 landowners and land users along the TAP pipeline. Each single one will have to enter into a contract with them to ensure that we can have access to that land, and there will be full compensation as well to all of those landowners and land users as well, because we're adopting the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is similar to the IFCs, so the Financing Corporation standards here. So just to give you a sense of scale, so we almost have projects within projects at the moment, but we're very much moving now from the development phase into the execution phase to be ready to receive gas on the Turkish-Greek border, hopefully by the end of 2019.
So if you look at this is a project, $45 billion in total. It brings in excess of 30,000 jobs, direct jobs, and it works with contract companies in each of the different countries along the pipeline. At present, in the upstream alone, since January, $9 billion worth of contracts have been placed. Though that includes contracts US, EU companies and local companies. With the intent that first gas will come at the end of 2018 in Azerbaijan and gas delivered into southern Europe in January 2020. This isn't going to be done very easily. This is an enormous project, single biggest project ever completed by BP. It will involve enormous amount of goodwill and support along the southern corridor, and very importantly, it's getting a lot of attention worldwide, a lot of support from the US, a lot of support from the EU, interested in making sure that all consideration is given to the security of European gas supply for the future.
Just maybe one final comment on that last point, and that is to see this very much as a first step for the gas piece. We talked about the scalability of the pipeline system. So as more and more gas comes on stream in the Caspian, we would expect that gas to come through the southern gas corridor and offer yet even more opportunities for providing an energy source for European household customers.
So knowing that many of you are students, because we looked at the guest list, we decided we weren't going to kill you with PowerPoint. Okay, I'm sure you have enough of that as it is. So we would like, for the moment, to open up the floor to any questions that you would like to ask. Brenda, if there's anything that you wanted to pick up on. And we'll go through a more informal conversation around that. Let's make it as interactive as possible if we could.
First, I'd like to thank Joe and Michael for taking out their time from their busy schedule and sharing. And this type of presentation I find especially refreshing, that it's just quite direct and gives a lot of opportunity for interaction. There's a few of the takeouts from their presentation I'd like to maybe expand on here. One is the whole question of interconnectors. You've probably heard these words and it sounds like, okay, a normal thing. Well, gas, in contrast to a lot of other traded goods, there's meaning an actual physical connection between markets. It's not something you could just send in an email or a chip. And for about 2 decades, the EU has talked about the importance of their markets being linked so that they could trade gas, they could reverse flows. If there was shortage in one place, they could make up. And actually, it's kind of interesting, as many as the politicians have talked about it for about 2 decades, they haven't really put public funds for it. And here this commercial project comes and becomes a catalyst for interconnecting of Italy, Greece, Albania, potentially Bulgaria. So it is kind of interesting, the balance between the private sector and the government defined goals. And another question here in terms of this project was decided prior to the Ukraine crisis in December 2013. Probably could say people have been working on it for about 5 years before that. And how we talked a lot about this, about half the group here is my students, we discussed this in class too, how we provide for energy security when we're doing right, you know, when the lights are on, the heat's on, how we think about energy security ahead of time, and if the market can think about that. Because basically, as we were saying, diversification of supplies of gas is like safe cars. It's something we all want, but we generally don't, you know, put the money out for it until we've gone through an accident or the lights have gone out. So I'd like to open the floor for discussion and questions to the audience. I'd like to especially encourage my students to, these are students that, just so you know, that show up at 8 a.m. to study Caspian energy, okay? So these are brave, brave students, and they deserve the floor. And if I could ask you if you have a question or comment to raise your hand, and also to identify yourself. It's also be a chance for Michael and Joe to meet these brilliant students that might want to work for them one summer or a year. So Peter, yes, I remembered your name.
All right, hi, I'm Peter Sadler. I'm a first-year master's student with the CERES program here at Georgetown. I'll take the question that you yourself had proposed. Lukoil and Nico, the Iranian and Russian oil companies, as is obvious from the map, they're not actually physically connected to the pipeline. Would you characterize their relationship as something of their regional political stakeholders, or their Caspian littoral states who plan to use the pipeline, or why specifically are these companies involved?
Yeah, so I would take them in the first way that you, good question, first way you described them, regional political stakeholders. They are extremely strong, extremely supportive partners. They demonstrate the foresight that the Azeri government that uses in creating these consortiums, whether it be the ACG consortium created 20 years ago to this consortium in the last 5 to 8 years. It means that countries in the region have something built into this. They have their stake in the game. It's not so much that Iran or Russia are looking for gas as such, but understandably, but they have their stake in the game. They're part of this, and that collaboration is essential to this being successful because you need support of all the areas.
Anything else from the students here? Ellie, Lance, yeah?
Lance Schneider, I'm an associate fellow from the Air Force with the Institute for Study Diplomacy. But so one factual question, you mentioned like the 100 kilometers of roads, the 50 bridges. Is that strictly in Albania, or is that across the entire project? And then I've got a follow-up question.
And do you mind building some bridges like that in the United States as well? I think we can use it here.
No, I'm only talking about TAP in this context, and that's only in Albania, where
So
it's very rural and very isolated.
So there's probably obviously other construction projects in every country along the way.
There may be.
There are.
Yeah. The important thing about this, I think, one can also see this as an added benefit, because obviously we have no need for those roads and bridges, once the construction process has been completed. So those will be handed over to the local authorities, to the communities for them, and it'll improve their access actually in and out of their villages. So hopefully it'll provide some good as well at the end of the day. But it'll be handed over to them.
But in answer, it's the same in Azerbaijan, it's the same in Georgia, the same in Turkey. In Turkey at the moment, we're building a road to create a camp, to build a road, to create a camp, to build a pipeline. So you can imagine the complexity of this because of the geography.
Right, and then similar on the geography lines, we can obviously all see that there's a very long pipeline there through Turkey. What is your biggest geopolitical concern or risk that keeps you up at night as far as this project goes? Is it transit states? So, what is it related to?
Well, up until last week, it was probably the landing point in Italy. Believe it or not, of all of this, what keeps me awake? I've aged dramatically in the last 3 months. So,
yeah, having to go to Italy all the time, but we feel really bad for that.
There's a lot of risks which we can talk about, but the one that is of great interest recently, and Michael can expand on it more, was there was local opposition of one form or another to the landing point in Italy. So you can imagine we have thousands of kilometres of pipeline, millions of dollars to spend, and we weren't getting any real clarity and support from the Italian government about that landing point being appropriate and given the necessary permits for. Now, in the last week or two, we've had some really positive news, John.
Yeah, I think it's very important to stress here that any major infrastructure project, regardless of where it occurs in the world, is likely
you know, we've all heard of the NIMBY syndrome. You know, this is just a fact of life. That's just what one has to deal with in terms of large projects. So that wasn't unexpected. It took us a bit longer than anticipated in terms of getting the environmental permit in Italy. But the fact is that the Italian government came through. They saw, you know, very strongly the political and strategic rationale of being a part of a very important value chain. We have a new, young, very young by Italian standards, dynamic Prime Minister, Matteo Renzi. He's brought in a bit of fresh air into the Italian system. He's brought in legislation, or is bringing in legislation. It's a decree called Sblocca Italia, which means unblock Italy. Now, it's a very important decree because the bureaucracy in Italy has been quite difficult for investors to come, and there's been lots of no groups, you know, no this, no that. But what he's tried to do is say, okay, it's important that we actually can attract investors. You know, we all know the situation that Europe is currently facing. It needs to attract investors. And by implementing this decree, it sort of short circuits, streamlines some of these processes and can accelerate the permitting process, which is important. If you're investing several $billion, euros, it doesn't really matter, into, you know, a country, into an area, you want to make sure that that investment is robust and that you don't spend too much time developing the idea. I heard some commentary earlier about, you know, how long this has all been going on. Well, for TAP, it started in 2003. And you imagine first gas in 2019, you know, maybe 2020, that's a long time. For Nabucco, they started in 2002. So had they been successful, they would have been at it even longer than us. And I think there one has to realize that, you know, these are not easy projects. And when you're then trying to develop a project not just in one country, but over 6, plus the Bulgarian link, 7, you can imagine the challenges in ensuring that that is all correct. And what keeps me up at night, yeah, I sort of kind of had the first sort of reaction that Joe did, ooh, I don't really know. It's sort of everything. It's the unknown that sort of keeps you up at night, because we've all seen, particularly in Italy and Greece, I'll just talk about TAP here, how many governments we've had in the last 2 years. I think the 4 prime ministers in Italy alone. You know, Italy, OECD country, you know, top 8 countries in the world. You know, it's a very strong economy, but even there we've had political uncertainty. But now I think we're hopefully in a new phase in Italy where things are stable, and, you know, we're working very well with the government and very much looking forward to that sort of future cooperation. But it's just not knowing what's going to happen, because those are things that are totally out of our control. And I think, you know, Joe called these non-technical risks. Easy with a pipeline. Easy, you know, if we have to move a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, we can do that. Technically, it's not an issue. Maybe a little bit more money, but one can deal with it. But with these non-technical risks, you don't know. It's much harder to assess, much harder to mitigate the potential risks. And then when they actually happen, you know, how do you then develop it? You need to react. So, yeah, it's not an easy business. But
So I've just written a list of what keep me awake at night. So other than construction risks, just in no particular order, partnership dynamics, regional conflict, political sport, changing governments, permits, local opposition, right down to are we going through an area where suddenly we find archaeological site? So we have to, you know, right down to that sort of level. Obviously, in everybody's mind at the moment is the crisis with Ukraine, impact of sanctions. That's just to name it. I just wrote that down while Michael was talking. But I'm sure I can keep going with pages and pages.
And there are 2 comments illustrating something that is discussed a lot about in class, that there is a field for political scientists, because when they're talking about those risks and mitigating those risks and something about a project for 20 years, here's a place where political scientists could actually get a job. So, Julia, do you like?
I had a question about the
introduce yourself.
I'm Julia Nane, IHS Energy, formerly PFC Energy. Can I ask about the financing for TANAP? Is it going to be financed mostly by SOPAR? And then Lukoil, I imagine, on the upstream side will be hindered on the financing with sanctions.
So let me answer 2 of them. Yeah, so at the moment, TANAP is funded by SOPAR. the good news we had was there was an HTA agreement was ratified in the Turkish Parliament last week, which will mean that both BOTAŞ and BP can take their share of TANAP, as you see on this. At the moment it's 100% SOCAR, but as you can see from here, BOTAŞ and BP will pick up 42% of the equity. So TANAP will be funded by BP, BOTAŞ and SOCAR going forward. Is that okay on the first one?
Yes, but largely SOCAR because they have the majority
They have
share.
58%, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And BOTAŞ doesn't have money.
State of Turkey has money.
Okay.
I mean, BOTAŞ and TPAO are both essentially arms of Turkish government.
Yeah.
Is that okay on that?
I guess Turkey has money.
On Lukoil, so this is a tricky one. So the recent sanctions delivered last Friday are the first time that we've seen sanctions which will have an implication potentially on Lukoil. All I can say at the moment is that our legal team in the UK and the US working with the lawyers are looking what the implications of those sanctions really have on Lukoil. So I can't comment as yet about exactly the implications, but they're being looked at, and it is a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, and I'll answer the question now around the Iranian company NICO, we work very, very closely with the US administration and the EU administration to get the necessary sanction exemptions to make this to be able to work. But saying that, we still have to comply very rigidly with a lot of agreements, whether it be technology transfer, so information being transferred to NICO. Have to be very clear about the boundaries of what we can share with NICO and what we can't share with NICO. The payment of cash calls, where they're paid from, what currency they're paid in. So we work with a legal firm here in the US, we work with a legal firm in the EU to work through a lot of these sanction issues.
I'm Ahmed Chashkurlu. I'm a Georgetown student too. Unfortunately, I'm not taking Professor Shaffer's class right now, but I worked with the Turkish Ministry of Energy this summer, and the thing that bugs us right now is the Russian gas dependency, and I was there at the negotiations with Iranians. They're not selling us any gas for any cheaper or any more quantity. So how could, I know we are going to get gas, but how exactly is this project going to secure Turkish gas market? And could there be potentially, if Turkey and the Kurdish region can come to an agreement, a shipment of Kurdish gas from the region using this project to Europe?
So two questions. I'll answer the first one. Are you happy with the second one? So first one, straightforward. Of the 16 BCMA coming outside of Azerbaijan, 6 gets delivered into Turkey. So very clear upside in terms of 6 BCMA being delivered into the Turkish market. So that's in answer to what's the benefit for them. And you can see why they want involvement in the upstream piece and why they want involved in TANAP. In terms of, are you happy to take the one on? Yeah.
Not that I'm a Kurdish expert in any shape or form. But yes, obviously gas coming here. If you go to BOTAŞ, you go to the headquarters, you'll see a beautiful map with lots of glittering, flashing lights. TANAP being as well, but another one being a sort of more southerly sort of parallel route. And so they're very upkeep, very keen to actually get gas supplies from there. There's a lot of Turkish presence in northern Iraq and the Kurdish area. So one sees, as long as there's a business opportunity, I think that will happen. But I think the one thing that's important in Turkey is that pricing in Turkey is very much state controlled. There are subsidies. It makes it very difficult to actually operate. So BOTAŞ actually finds itself, I think, in quite a difficult situation because the state demands that it sells gas at a certain price. Meanwhile, it has to pay more for that gas from outside. So I think one of the key challenges in Turkey is not necessarily about pipelines, and there will be a growth in the market. That's absolutely clear. The question is how are they going to liberalise their market? If they keep talking about creating a trading hub, and if you see all of these pipelines coming through Turkey, and the potential, who knows, from East Med gas potentially coming through Turkey. Great opportunity, absolutely fantastic opportunity. But if that market is going to stay in Turkey, something has to be done around the sort of whole pricing mechanism. I think that's one of the key challenges.
Yeah.
That lady.
Okay, sure, sorry.
10 minutes.
Okay, hi, yeah.
How did Statoil get in the mix? What was the criteria for participating?
In which bit?
Well, Statoil's here,
In TAP.
yeah.
In TAP, they joined TAP in 2008. Began flirting with TAP in sort of 2004.
So there's like an open bidding process to participate in these?
I think at that time, it wasn't really very clear what on earth was going to happen. There wasn't actually a strategy as to how this gas would actually come through. Again, most people are familiar with the Nabucco story, where they were going to take the gas from South Caucasus pipeline and then bring it all the way up into Baghdad in Austria. I think from Statoil's point of view, it really was important that they sort of reviewed the different options and the IGI Poseidon option, and kind of thought actually, the sort of more direct route actually made a lot of sense to bring that market, bring the gas to a big market, Italy. And from that point of view, I think and that was then further evolved by BP as the operator, thought actually it would be quite a good idea to ensure there's some healthy competition. And whatever we as pipeline developers may think of that process, it was a pretty tough process that BP put us through and the Shah Deniz consortium put us through. Spending and investing tens of millions of euros on developing a concept. I said there were 4 projects, not really knowing if that would actually result in anything at the end of the day. I think the Statoil contribution to TAP also helped us because we were then the only pipeline that had an upstream player. And I think that's quite significant. And if you look at European pipelines, or globally, generally speaking, unless you have sort of upstream players actually within the pipeline consortium, or you have a supply of gas, very, very difficult to actually be successful. Merchant pipelines actually work probably in the US much better than anywhere else. But in other parts of the world, they don't work so well. The Statoil had that sort of strategic intent, again, to make sure, more direct line, felt that was a good option, created, again, a bit of competition. And they're still with us, they're still a major shareholder of 20% on the BP and so forth.
And Statoil in the upstream it's a follow-on from the original Shah Deniz 1 agreement that was made all those years ago. So Shah Deniz 2 has the same component members.
Which is all linked back historically to the BP Statoil alliance.
Thank you.
I did follow up on an interesting comment here. Michael talked about the importance of an upstream player in the success of a pipeline. This flies in the face of the EU policy of unbundling that wants to, separate these different actors. So it's interesting. I think here was a question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Taylor, first year student in CERES. I can't help but notice that the specs on TAP are pretty specific and not so much on TANAP. Does that mean you guys still haven't reached a consensus on what size of pipeline to use, and to that extent how much the project's going to cost? Because the variations have varied.
No, not at all. Specs are actually, because of the way this is being built from east to west, the specs on TANAP are probably equally, if not further advanced in terms of where they are. They have an EPCM contractor, an engineering contractor with them, Worley Parsons. They're ramped up to 160, 170 persons team. The spec is, I just didn't go into it, but the spec is it's all, the whole way across the spec is well managed and well known.
And then what's the expected cost?
It's 56-inch
Oh, they're
from
using
the border
56.
to Eskişehir around here, and then 48-inch for the last bit.
Oh,
It's
okay.
about 10 to 12 billion dollars.
All right.
Please
Thanks.
don't quote me on any of these
Yeah.
in 5 years' time.
Questions, comments? Yeah.
Good afternoon, my name is Ellie, I'm a sophomore, so I'm an undergrad, I'm in Professor Shaffer's class. We've talked quite a bit in the course about how even one transit state can pose a problem to any international pipeline. I was wondering, since you mentioned that it clearly traverses 7 countries and a variety of cultures and political regimes, do you foresee any problems with the transit states? And if so, are there any precautions in place at the moment?
Good question.
Great question. There's always going to be, if you didn't expect issues, you would be foolish. So yes, we will always expect issues through the states. However, what you're seeing here is that each of these transit states, again, has a stake in the game. They have something to be gained from this pipeline being successful. So Albania has a local content, a workforce, the single biggest infrastructure project in Albanian history. Now, there's something to be gained for them there. Greece, 10,000, approximately 10,000-ish jobs in Greece. Indirect jobs in Greece, where you've got 27% unemployment. So there's something to be gained for that. All the way through, as you go through this southern corridor, you have an alliance of people who have a common interest in delivery of this. And I think, as I said earlier on, if one element fails, it all fails. So there's an enormous alignment. There's obviously cultural differences, there's political differences, but the alignment overall is what's making this work. And that alliance needs to stay in place for it to be successful. There is an event in Baku. Are you coming to Baku this weekend? There's an event in Baku this weekend where we have an enormous group of heads of government who are related to this project coming to Baku to celebrate the groundbreaking of this project. And just that relationship building and that alliance is fundamental.
Let me be a little bit more specific on my team back. Investors, Joe already mentioned the number, $45 billion. As investors, we don't just do that on the basis of goodwill. That's not going to happen. It's far too risky. So what do we do as prudent operators, prudent firms? We actually facilitate a bunch of agreements that actually ensure that the commercial and legal aspects of the project are pulled together and they're fairly tight and concrete. So what have we done? And similar to the other parts of the value chain, we have a host government agreement in Greece and Albania, as an example. So in effect, that becomes a standalone law in Greece and in Albania with a whole bunch of prerequisites. Now, why do we need such agreements? You may think, oh, well, everything will be in the law, it shouldn't be a problem. But no, there are very few aspects around sort of foreign investors coming in. And for example, in Albania, they don't have laws that govern the way that pipelines should be governed. So again, as investors, we need to make sure that in the law that will govern, and how you deal with land acquisition, etc. Now, those are tap-to-state interventions and agreements. But in order to make sure that there is a treaty, a high-level treaty, to bind all the three countries together, what we then negotiated was an intergovernmental agreement. And that intergovernmental agreement then binds all three countries, again, on a range of issues relating to finance, relating to cooperation, etc. That ensures that if one country doesn't sort of do what it set out that it was going to do in the intergovernmental agreement, then the other two can say, well, hang on a minute, we need to look at this, we need to make sure that this is resolved. Similarly, I won't talk about it, there's similar arrangements elsewhere along the value chain. So this is all underpinned by a very solid legal framework, and then a very solid contractual framework which deals with the commercial side of things, the transportation, the tariffs, etc., etc. And then there's taxation agreements that are also dealt with, in our case, independently or bilateral arrangements between Greece and Switzerland, Albania, Switzerland, Italy. These are all still have to be negotiated. So there's a huge amount of paperwork that underpins the...
And that was the 5-year build-up to the FID signature, the funding signature in December of last year. That was all of the agreements that built up to that.
In the back there.
My name is Ari Middleman. The one country that I don't see on the map, which is a player, perhaps a stakeholder, is here, the United States. So I'm curious, being that we are minutes from the sometimes hallowed halls of government, both the administration and the Congress, what do you see their role in the short run and the long run, meaning probably the next administration?
Well, TAP is often referred to as a transatlantic pipeline. Maybe we rename it and we come and land here.
There's been phenomenal support from the US government and from the EU government, EU Commission, in order to help us deliver this. And they're looking broader picture. They're looking at the strategic importance of gas supplies and the support. Without the support, we wouldn't be where we are. I mean, it's as simple as that. We literally wouldn't be where we are without particularly US support and EU support. And we're here in Washington. We're meeting with the hallowed halls, as you described them, and we're looking for that continued support. And everything is very positive, suggests that we're going to continue to get that support going forward.
Yes, and I think don't underestimate the US government's role in making sure that the Southern Gas Corridor actually materializes. Equally, the important role they played during the BTC era in making sure that that happens. So they are and they remain a big player. I don't see any fundamental change regarding a potential change in the actual administration here.
And there is an event this evening purely to thank the US administration for the support 20 years ago for BTC and for the next 5 or so years for the Southern Corridor delivery.
This is Azerbaijan. From BP's perspective, what are the newest sources you're looking for? What do you have your eyes on in terms of the sources that could contribute to this pipeline? Is it the Eastern Mediterranean, Turkmenian gas? So, from your perspective.
So from our perspective, the immediate, there's still plenty of opportunity within Azerbaijan itself to find extra gas supplies to support this pipeline. And you know, we've been partners for 20 years with Azerbaijan, and we'll continue to be partners with Azerbaijan. And so our initial review of supplies is going to be in Azerbaijan. There's plenty of work ongoing there. Now, you bring up the question of how else can we fill the pipeline? Where can gas supplies come from? Where there's a political will, there's a way. So, you know, Turkmenistan, absolutely. Iraq, potentially. Kurdistan, potentially. Eastern Mediterranean, yes. But this is long-term play. This is not something that's going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. The Shah Deniz 2 plateau, it goes through, of gas plateau delivery, goes through to 2026. So what we would hope is we will in the future access more gas supplies, but at the moment the concentration was building Southern Gas Corridor, developing Shah Deniz 2, and then looking for options within Azerbaijan to develop. From a BP perspective.
Do you have specific fields you're looking at in Azerbaijan?
There are there's specific projects going on, Absheron project that could be delivered into this pipeline potentially.
Yes, can you stand up and identify yourself?
Kelsey Jensen, Jefferson Waterman International. Kind of back to regional security issues. Who is responsible at the end of the day for security of the pipeline? Is it going to be intergovernmental organizations? I assume that there's going to be agreements put in place. Does BP have internal security that's going to be in charge of all of it? But how is the security?
Physical security.
Yeah, physical security with everything that's going on in Turkey and spillover effects that we're looking at potentially happening.
Well, for TAP, yeah, we have security measures, but we don't envisage, I mean, it's not a turbulent area. So I think one important point maybe to remember that we haven't spoken about is that the entire pipeline is buried. And it's 1 meter underground. We have block valves, they're secure. The block valve stations will have about 30 odd on our pipeline, on the TAP pipeline. You usually have people that go out and monitor and sort of review the pipeline just to make sure that there's no fiddling around with digging holes. Obviously, you have a lot of hot tapping, particularly for the oil pipelines, which is a bit easier to do that on a gas pipeline, you'll get a nasty surprise. I don't mean to say that flippantly, obviously no one wants any injury or death, but one has to educate people. Part of that will be the information campaigns that we, imagine the rest of the elements of the value chain will conduct. But just reflecting a little bit back on history, I was involved in the BTC pipeline. I was based in Ankara for 3 years. I was responsible for the social impact assessment. And it's quite interesting that you still hear some discussions in ministries, in academia, and often the question is asked, how come, relatively speaking, one would consider, as you said, that Turkey may be a difficult area, why have there been actually a limited amount of of attacks on the pipeline. And one of the answers is often given by ministry officials is that because BP, as we were when I was BP, as the operator of the whole system, we worked very closely with the communities. We established a whole community investment program. And I think what's important, we had about over 300 settlements all the way along the villages, communities that we passed through on BTC. And once you have the buy-in, and once you've been shown to actually help and contribute to the villages, many of the areas up here in Kars, Ardahan, as Erzurum and Erzincan provinces, but particularly the very remote ones up here, they didn't have access to basic water supplies, for example. So we helped, we worked together with municipalities, they put in sweat equity, they dug the trenches, we then bought the pipe, we got an NGO to help them put that together. So they saw a mutual benefit, and what was interesting is that if they saw problems or trouble or suspicious characters, they would actually be the first ones to then say, "Ooh, not sure about this character, and don't know what he or she is up to." So I think if you can build that mutual relationship and trust, I think that's probably one of the most important things. We often think about military, security, machine guns, but actually it's the softer side that actually, I would argue, works equally well in making sure that they have a sense of ownership, in a sense, because they're benefiting from this pipeline going through with these investment programs, etc. So maybe that's a different way of looking at it, but I would say that that actually contributes to security.
From one physical security perspective, the only place you actually would see it was in Turkey on BTC, and that was the reinforcement and protection of sort of compressor stations. But overall, it's more about this, particularly in Georgia, Azerbaijan, it's about patrolling the route. But that patrolling the route is less from a security point of view and more back to what Michael talked about in terms of hot tapping, people illegally accessing the pipeline. So we had one about a month ago in Georgia. We caught somebody trying to tap into the pipeline in Georgia.
I think we'll take our last question from our youngest student here.
Mr. Shaffer, Mr. Murphy, thank you very much. What is Russia's position on attitude to the southern gas corridor? They're involved in something called the Northern, I've forgotten the name of it, the Northern Nord Stream. See, what are they patronizing you? Are they making problems or whatever?
And they're
At the moment, there is nothing happening untoward from a Russian perspective with delivery of the Southern Corridor.
This is sort of a competition to the North Stream, isn't it? Or is it?
No, it's not competition. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for gas pipelines into Europe, and at the moment, this is being delivered without any sort of involvement whatsoever.
I think you must remember, if you're referring to the South Stream, that's all the proposed South Stream project which comes here. It's bringing the same gas molecule.
I think I'm confusing you with Google also.
So I think this has been a really very interesting afternoon. This is a fantastic audience. I'm really, I think people know a lot about the project that are interested. We also have a couple representatives of Albanian American, Greek American, maybe Armenian American communities that might be also interested in the project. So maybe after in the discussion, you have a chance, and many of our students are very interested in meeting you. So I'd like to thank the audience for coming, and I'd like to also thank Michael and Joe for this very interesting and very fresh presentation.